My house, the one my late husband and I built with quiet, stubborn work, never failed to look imposing when it was dressed up so elegantly. But tonight, beneath the shine, something nasty was brewing under the surface. My daughter Madeline had insisted on throwing an extravagant birthday party for her 35th. She said it was a celebration worthy of her future, as if she hadn't already taken more than I had built. I stood by the dessert table, with the sweet scent of vanilla and champagne, watching her twirl under the approving gaze of her friends and associates. Their elegant suits and designer dresses shimmered under the lights. Flattery floated in the air, full of sugar and disguised greed. My heart skipped a beat. She was still my daughter, but I barely recognized her anymore. Ever since Madeline married Chase, that real estate developer with the polished smile and cold eyes, her ambition had sharpened its edges. She was always ambitious, but Chase gave it an edge. As the night wore on, she approached me with a calculated sway and a brittle smile, a fine leather folder in her manicured hand. "Mom," she purred in a tone that was too loud for how close we were, her voice dripping with fake affection. "Everyone's here. It's the perfect time to make it official, don't you think?" I blinked at the folder. Heads began to turn towards us. The soft murmur of the room shifted, a subtle pause, as if prey noticing a predator. "You've been talking for months about transferring the house to me," she continued, her smile tightening. "Let's sign." I felt my fingers grip the thin stem of the champagne glass even harder. My pulse pounded in my ears, louder than the orchestra in the corner. "Madeline, this isn't the time or the place," I replied quietly, trying to stay calm. "Keep my spine straight." Her smile vanished, replaced by a thin, icy line. "You always say that, Mom, but let's be realistic. You're not getting any younger. Chase says it's best to sort these things out while you're still of sound mind." The jab was intentional, a soft cut wrapped in silk. The silence grew thicker. Phones went up. The crystals of the chandelier reflected the flashes of a dozen cameras. I felt my cheeks burn, but my voice didn't tremble. "We can talk about this another day." Her nostrils flared, the silence turned into fog, and then Chase appeared beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder like a well-dressed threat. And that's when it happened. Madeline, my daughter. My own flesh and blood reached for the enormous birthday cake in the center of the dessert table. 3 tiers of fondant, with sugar roses meticulously handcrafted by the most expensive pastry shop in the city. In one violent, humiliating movement, she smashed the whole thing into my face. People gasped. Cell phones started ringing. Someone couldn't suppress a laugh. "You're a selfish old woman," Madeline's voice cut through the murmur like broken glass. "This house should be mine already." Frosting dripped down my chin. The cold, sticky sugar clung to my blouse, my hair, my dignity as I stood there, blinking through the mess, through the shame. The light from the chandelier fractured on the marble floor, catching the cruel glint in her eyes. The house. Always the house. Never the years I spent holding this family together after Henry, my husband, died. Never the sacrifices, never the quiet dignity I maintained while they built their lives on the foundation I laid. I slowly wiped my face with the linen napkin, with the same grace as if I were touching up my lipstick. And I spoke, calm as water, firm as stone. "You'll inherit it." I said it in a voice that was soft but sharp enough to cut at the right moment. Madeline's lip curled. "And when would that be?" "When you finally kick the bucket. When you're so senile you don't even know where you are." A collective gasp swept through the room. Mark put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture I recognized, but Madeline, poisoned by her own words, pushed him away. "You don't even use this house," she muttered under her breath. "You barely leave your study. You already live like a ghost." Those words should have hurt. Maybe a few years ago they would have, but now I just felt tired, not weak, not broken, just fed up with the charade, tired of the games disguised as fake smiles and venomous compliments. I straightened up, smoothed my blouse, and fixed my gaze on my daughter. "Madeline," I said quietly, but each syllable fell like a stone in still water. "If you really think you're entitled to something that doesn't belong to you yet, you're going to get exactly what you deserve." I turned then, my heels echoing against the marble, bouncing through the grand hallway. As I walked away from the room full of murmurs and wide eyes, the portraits on the walls watched me pass, their solemn faces, the eyes of my late husband among them, steady, knowing. They had no idea who they were messing with, not yet. The door to my study closed behind me with a soft click, locking me in with the silence, with the truth. And I smiled. The door to my study clicked shut, isolating the noise, the forced laughter, the whispers, the judgment that slithered down the grand hallway like smoke. For a moment, I stood there, my back against the polished wood, listening to the faint hum of the chandelier lights and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The frosting was still stuck to my cheeks, cold and sticky like the residue of betrayal. I could hear the muffled beat of the music filtering in from under the door. The party was still alive, still breathing, as if nothing had happened. As if my daughter hadn't just tried to publicly humiliate me, to take everything I had taken a lifetime to build. I exhaled, steadying my breath, and crossed the room to the mirror above the fireplace. The image that the mirror reflected back at me wasn't new to me, but tonight, under the dim light of the lamp, it looked harsher. The lines of dried makeup on my face, the faint trace of mascara under my eyes, the wrinkles around my mouth, more pronounced by years of holding back what I should have said. I wiped my face with a cold, damp towel, avoiding looking myself in the eye for as long as possible. But in the end, I had to. Victoria Sterling, widow, matriarch, alone. How did we get here? My gaze drifted to the old portraits that decorated the wall. There was Madeline, still a teenager in that photo, dressed in her riding clothes, her father's proud hand on her shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. She was always Henry's darling, his adored little girl. I didn't mind then. She was sweet, grateful, eager to impress. But that version of Madeline vanished when she married Chase. I never trusted him. I knew it from the first time he set foot in this house, the way his eyes scanned every corner, lingering on the ceiling molding, the marble floor, the antique grandfather clock. How his compliments towards Madeline soon turned into disguised questions, always circling around the properties, the accounts, the assets. Henry used to joke that Chase had ambition. I knew it was calculation. And now, that same calculation had infected my daughter. The whistle of the kettle broke the silence. I crossed the study and poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, the same ritual I'd been repeating for decades. The faint aroma of lemon balm and honey filled the room. I needed to calm down, sinking into my favorite armchair by the window. I lingered there a while longer, staring at the portraits. My husband's eyes stared back at me from his old photograph. Steady, protective. What would you do, Henry? I whispered to the air. What would you say? But there was no answer. Only the constant ticking of the clock and the distant echo of clinking glasses on the other side of the house. They thought they could corner me tonight, make me give in with a smile and a birthday cake. They thought they could break me. They didn't know me at all. I took a slow sip of tea, letting the bitterness linger on my tongue like a quiet reminder. No, Victoria, you're not broken. You're not finished. Not yet. The morning sunlight streamed through the wide windows of the solarium, painting golden lines on the floor. The birds outside sang, oblivious to the storm brewing within these walls. I had barely finished preparing my second cup when I heard the soft knock on the back door. There she was, Madeline, standing in the doorway, put together down to the last detail. A light pink blouse, minimal makeup, no jewelry, her blonde hair, loosely pulled back, framing her face, the perfect image of a repentant daughter. I knew better. Mom, she began, her voice rehearsed, calm. Can we talk? I gestured to the wicker chair across from me without saying a word. 2 cups steamed on the table. I was expecting her. She sat down carefully, crossing her legs with elegance, her posture calculated. A silence stretched between us like a curtain that hadn't yet fallen. And then the performance began. I wanted to apologize for last night, she said, her eyes glassy, her voice trembling just enough. It got out of control. I never wanted it to go that far. I sipped my tea without saying anything. She shifted uncomfortably under my silence, like a child caught with sticky fingers and a broken jar. You have to understand, she said, with that sweet, syrupy voice I knew by heart. We're worried about you, about your health, about how overwhelming it must be to take care of everything. There it was, the ambush. You've been so strong for so long, she added, reaching her hand across the table to take mine. But maybe it's time to let someone help you. You shouldn't have to carry all this alone anymore. Her husband's words at the party echoed in my head. You're not getting any younger. I let her take my hand, even though it took all my willpower not to pull it away immediately. And what kind of help did you have in mind? I asked in a serene voice. without taking my eyes off hers. She smiled with that same forced, condescending smile she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. Chase and I have been talking to some people, financial advisors, estate planners. We could ... take care of things for you. Take that weight off your shoulders, handle the paperwork, the property. There it was, the real reason she came. I leaned back slightly, without letting go of my cup. The property, I repeated. Yes, she replied quickly, noticing my hesitation and trying to patch things up. We don't want to take anything away from you. We just want to protect it. For the family, for the future. I smiled softly, the smile I had perfected for decades. How very thoughtful of you. She seemed relieved, convinced that I was giving in. I placed my cup on the table carefully. I've managed this house for over 40 years, dear, I replied in a firm voice. I think I can handle it a little longer. Her smile faltered for an instant. She gripped her cup tighter. Mom, we're just thinking ahead. Chase, he knows the right people. We could simplify everything for you. I tilted my head slightly, as if I were considering it. You worry so much about me, Madeline. I appreciate it. She blinked, now unsure of where this was going. What if we talk about this more another day? I offered lightly, standing up. Not today though, I need some fresh air. The conversation was over, for now, but the fight had just begun. It wasn't even noon when I heard them. I had walked down the hall quietly, just to grab a book from the small library next to the foyer. The house, with all its elegance, creaked in all the right places, the old wood settling, the faint hum of the air through the ducts. It had always made me feel safe, as if the house itself was alive, watching over me. But today, that familiar creaking brought another kind of warning. The door to the downstairs office, the one Henry used for years to review every contract and every account, was ajar. I wasn't supposed to be home, or at least that's what they thought. Madeline and Chase, voices floated down the hall, low, tight, but clear enough to cut through the silence. We have to hurry, Madeline murmured in a tone laced with annoyance. She's more stubborn than I thought. Chase replied dryly, as if chewing ice. That's why we need Dr. Frederick to get involved. If we can get her declared mentally incompetent, it's over. We won't need her signature. No more delays. Everything clean. My pulse pounded harder, but my body didn't move, as if the house was holding its breath too. And he's willing, Madeline asked, lowering her voice even further, though not enough to escape the echo of these old hallways. Of course he is, Chase laughed, a deep rumble. We've been donating to his clinic for 2 years. He'll write any report we ask for. A pause. The faint sound of papers sliding. As soon as we have the title, we sell it. Chase continued, with that oily tone of someone already savoring victory. With this market, we could get 2 million before the end of the year. That'll clear all my debts. Madeline lowered her tone, hesitating slightly. And Mom won't have to worry about anything anymore. Once she's declared incompetent, the judge gives us total control. We can take her to that place in Savannah. It's nice. She'll be ... comfortable. The gall, the absolute arrogance. I gripped the edge of the bookshelf, my knuckles white, but I didn't make a sound, not yet, not without getting more. Chase spoke again, colder. We have to have the papers ready before she changes her mind again, and keep her believing that we're on her side. Don't spook her. She still thinks I care, Madeline muttered. That hurt more than anything. I moved away from the door, step by step, careful not to let the floor complain. The betrayal weighed on my chest like a stone, but my hands didn't tremble, not anymore. They wanted to declare me incompetent. My own daughter. For years I convinced myself that Madeline's selfishness was a phase, an immaturity that would fade with time, that those sharp edges of hers would smooth out, that the coldness in her voice came with adulthood, nothing more. But this wasn't immaturity. This was planned treason. I slipped back into my study, the old oak door closing softly behind me. The room enveloped me like a thick blanket, muffling the murmur of the house beyond. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the brutal clarity that washed over me. They were wrong, a mistake that they would pay dearly for. They still think I'm that fragile old lady who needs care, the one who lives among teacups and gardening clubs. They don't know me. The truth is, it was Henry's idea, and if he were here, I could almost hear him whispering from the framed photo above the fireplace. Don't show them your fear, Victoria. Show them your patience. The next morning, I woke up with a single goal: Courage was a luxury I couldn't afford. I needed strategy. I needed allies. I picked up the old rotary phone I had on my nightstand. The receiver, cold and familiar in my hand, my fingers paused for a moment over the worn numbers before dialing. It had been months since I had spoken to Claire. Not because we had drifted apart, but because we understood each other without needing to be all over each other. There are friendships that simply exist, steady, constant, like the stone foundation of this house. Her voice answered on the second ring, warm and sharp as always. Victoria. Good Lord, it's been so long. I exhaled without realizing I was holding my breath. Claire, darling, do you have a moment to talk in private? Her tone changed immediately, sharp as a newly drawn blade. Of course. Are you all right? Not entirely, I admitted. I need your advice. Where do we meet? Not here, I said quietly, glancing towards the hallway, almost expecting Madeline to appear with another folder full of papers. There were too many ears in this house. Claire didn't hesitate. The cafe on Lafayette Square, at noon. I'll be there. The cafe was almost empty when I arrived, except for two elderly gentlemen playing chess in a corner, and a girl reading by the window. I chose a hidden table in the back, away from prying eyes. Within minutes, Claire appeared, impeccable, elegant, in her tailored gray coat and discreet pearl earrings, but with a sharp gaze, attentive, the kind of gaze that doesn't let anything pass. She sat down across from me, interlacing her hands on the table. Tell me everything. I didn't hold anything back. The birthday party, the humiliation, the visit on the terrace, but above all, the conversation I overheard in the hallway. Claire listened without interrupting. Her lips pressed into a thin line as I recounted every word, every threat disguised as concern. When I finished, her expression was cold, calculated. Her lawyer instinct fully awake. They're not playing games anymore, I said softly. They want to erase me. She nodded, quickly. If they're already talking to a doctor willing to sign an incompetence declaration, you don't have much time. I gripped my coffee cup, searching for a little center in the heat. I need to move before they do. You need proof, Claire said firmly. Solid proof, that can't be questioned, that they're plotting to take away your legal rights, carefully, without raising suspicion. I looked at her directly, without blinking. That's what I was hoping to hear from you. For an instant, I saw a flicker of pride soften her gaze. You've always had a quiet strength, Victoria. But this requires more than strength. It requires precision. I nodded once. I'm ready. Claire exhaled, already entering that calculating mode I had seen so many times in court. You're going to need someone discreet, a private investigator, someone who knows how to get evidence, without leaving a trace. A slight smile escaped me. I think I know someone. Her lips curved the same way. Perfect. She reached her hand across the table, placed it on mine, the weight of her support as firm as her voice. We're going to make sure they regret underestimating you. Outside, the first leaves of autumn swirled in the wind. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. The man Claire recommended was as discreet as one could imagine. Mr. Liam. He didn't give his first name, which, on reflection, inspired even more confidence. We met 2 days later in the lobby of the old Bellevue Hotel, a relic from the 1940s, with worn velvet armchairs and bronze elevators that creaked as if they were about to collapse at any moment. It was the kind of place no one paid attention to anymore. Ideal for quiet business. I sat in a corner, sipping weak coffee in a chipped porcelain cup, when he approached. He was in his late 50s, pressed pants, graying hair, and a face so ordinary that it was forgotten as soon as you looked away. But his eyes didn't miss a thing. Mrs. Warner. His voice was low, measured, like a man accustomed to staying off the radar. I nodded, extending my hand. Mr. Liam. He sat down across from me, pulling a thin leather notebook and a pen from his pocket. No fancy briefcases. No flashy gadgets. Just what was necessary for someone who knows how to observe. Claire gave me a general idea, he said as he opened the notebook, but I prefer to hear it directly from you. I told him everything. The humiliation at the party, Madeline's forced sweetness and Chase's icy precision, the conversation I heard in the office hallway, the plan to have me declared incompetent, the bot doctor, the attempt to take the house. As I spoke, Liam wrote small, neat notes, without his face betraying any emotion. When I finished, he simply nodded. They're playing with fire, he commented. tapping the paper with the tip of the pen. But arrogance makes traitors careless. That will be their weakness. A slight smile appeared on my face. That's what I'm counting on. He pulled a small, discreet device from his pocket. Black, about the size of a pack of gum. Voice recorder, he explained. It's legal for personal use in this state. As long as you're part of the conversation, it's valid. I turned it over in my fingers, surprised at how ordinary it looked. And yet, that little thing could dismantle their whole plan. Record everything that sounds strange to you, Liam instructed. If they mention the house, the doctor, the legal papers, anything that smells of pressure or manipulation, keep them talking. Stay calm, make them believe you're still having doubts. I put the recorder in my purse, feeling its small weight settle among my things. Somehow, that eased the burden on my chest a little. And Dr. Frederick, I asked. I've already started digging, Liam assured me. His relationship with your son-in-law is deeper than you thought. Donations, referrals, closed-door meetings. I'm going to find the traces. The faint tinkling of a spoon against a cup echoed through the lobby. For a moment, we were both silent. You're going to need patience, he warned at last. They're going to push harder. If they notice you hesitating, they're going to take advantage. But the more they think they have you cornered, the more they're going to show their cards. I've had patience my whole life, Mr. Liam, I replied quietly. I can handle a few more weeks. He barely smiled, a slight, approving one. Then, let's begin. I left that meeting with the recorder safely tucked away in my purse, my steps firm despite the storm that was approaching. They thought I was fragile, that I would crumble under the pressure. But what they didn't know was that while they were laying their traps, I was already rebuilding my foundation, brick by brick. The following days were a masterclass in acting. Madeline and Chase came often, their rehearsed concern as well-polished as ever. Madeline brought pastries from that ridiculously expensive bakery downtown, fussed over my health, and mentioned how confusing it must be to manage the affairs of the estate. Chase, like a good reptile, in impeccable pants, always brought every conversation back to the same point, protecting the family's future. With each visit I gave them the face they expected. The tired widow, overwhelmed by papers and legal procedures. I let my voice crack a little. I fumbled with the teapot, lost a paper on purpose, and every word, every condescending comment, every disguised threat was perfectly recorded by that recorder hidden behind the ceramic flower vase on the kitchen shelf. They felt more secure with each visit, mistaking my silence for surrender. Mom, Madeline murmured one afternoon, sitting straight on the edge of the armchair on the terrace. It's not just about the house. It's about simplifying your life. You deserve to enjoy your golden years without so much stress. Chase nodded, pushing a glossy folder across the table. More papers. Property transfer forms, financial authorization, all carefully printed. No doubt prepared by the same lawyer they use. Just a few signatures are missing, he added in a soft voice. And you won't have to worry about any of this anymore. I picked up the folder, feigning insecurity. My fingers trembling, just enough to make it seem real. It's too much, I whispered. Your father always took care of this. Exactly, Madeline interjected, with a smile that widened. And now it's our turn to help you. The recorder kept capturing everything, silently, under the flower vase. They thought they were winning. I let them think so. That night, after they left, I took out the recordings and listened to them, reviewing their false kindness, their words chosen so carefully. Liam was right. Arrogance makes people careless. By the end of the week, I had hours of audio, a paper trail with evidence of manipulation, and a plan that was hardening like cement between bricks. The storm was coming, and I wasn't afraid. I was ready. They didn't take long to show their desperation. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the door like an unwanted whisper. Thick paper, my name written in Chase straight, angular handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before running the letter opener along the flap. Inside, neatly arranged, was a complete legal package: authorization to transfer the property, changes in power of attorney, financial custody forms. Every document written with precision, all perfectly typed. They were just missing one thing: my signature. I left the papers on the foyer table, their weight much greater than the space they physically occupied. It wasn't just ink and paper, it was their assumption. Their assumed right, their belief that I was one trembling stroke away from surrendering. And at the end of each page, there was already Madeline's signature, neat, with her round loops. And Chase, too, orderly, secure. They weren't even waiting for my consent. They were acting as if it was already a done deal. I didn't call them, not yet. I called Claire. Her voice was calm, but tight, when I told her. They already signed for me. I said each word like a stone falling into place. That's forgery, she blurted out, her lawyer instinct breaking through her usual tone. If they try to submit those documents without your approval, they're going to say, I agreed. I interrupted, in a firm voice. They're going to paint me as someone overwhelmed, confused, grateful for their help. Claire exhaled slowly. I could hear her mind turning on the other side of the phone. Fine, she said at last. Let them keep pushing. The more they insist, the more they help us. There was a pause. I could almost imagine her walking back and forth in her office, glasses low, legal pad in hand. They're arrogant, Victoria, she added in a low, confident voice. That's what's going to destroy them. I hung up and took the papers to the study, putting them in the same drawer where Henry's diaries were. Henry's neat handwriting, preserved for decades, whispered the same silent warning. They think you're weak, let them think so. That night, I prepared the house. Every corner, every creaking board, every familiar space that for years had given me comfort would now become my fortress. I placed a second recorder in the living room, carefully hidden under the side table. Another at the main entrance, camouflaged among a dish with keys and loose change, and one more behind the mantel clock in the dining room. Its discreet red light flickered when it turned on. They didn't know it, but every word, every measured attempt at manipulation, would be recorded. My defense wasn't going to be a desperate cry or unsupported accusations. It would be irrefutable proof. And then I waited. As expected, they didn't take long to return. 2 days later, Madeline arrived with a bottle of Pinot Noir and her best performance as a concerned daughter. Her eyes shone with a determination hidden behind the disguise of affection. Mom, she began in a soft tone, settling on the armchair in front of me. I know all this is overwhelming you, but we just want to help you. I poured the tea with steady hands, despite the whirlwind that was rumbling in my chest. I appreciate that, dear, she smiled, tight, rehearsed. It's just that, she hesitated, as she played with her bracelet. I'm worried about how you're managing the property. It's too much of a burden. Her eyes darted to the side table where the recorder was hidden, unaware of what it contained. Chase and I talked to Dr. Frederick. She continued in that soft tone, full of disguised venom. It's just a wellness assessment, nothing serious. It can help put the judge at ease, in case something unexpected happens. There it was. Their first real move. I took a sip of tea. Unexpected. She gave a weak laugh. Accidents happen. Sometimes there's confusion. It's better to be prepared, don't you think? The recorder captured every word, every drop of false concern. And if Dr. Frederick says I'm perfectly fine? I asked, looking her straight in the eye. A flash of annoyance crossed her face, but she erased it in a second. That would be wonderful. Of course, she lied. The tea tasted bitter, but I swallowed it, letting the heat keep me centered. They thought I was walking into their trap, heart open, body frail. They had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. The walls weren't closing in on me, but on them. The appointment with Dr. Frederick was scheduled for the following Monday. Madeline offered to take care of everything, with her facade of concern, but it didn't matter anymore. By that time, I had already spoken with Mr. Silas. That guy's as much a doctor as I am a ballet dancer, he had said sarcastically on the phone. Medical degree, yes. Seriousness, not so much. The guy had a history, quiet arrangements, dubious evaluations, always benefiting whoever paid the most. A useful puppet for families who wanted to get rid of an uncomfortable relative. But this time, they didn't count on how uncomfortable I could be. The morning of the appointment, I dressed with intention. A light blue silk blouse, tailored dress pants, low heels, discreet jewelry. Everything in order, everything polished. Nothing like the image of the fragile and disoriented matriarch they expected to present him. I greeted Dr. Frederick at the door with a smile so firm that even I was surprised. Dr. Frederick, I said warmly, shaking his hand. Please, come in. His eyes briefly scanned the foyer, calculating, probably imagining banknotes floating above every antique vase and every oil painting. Chase and Madeline were in the living room, standing with that tension that shows when you're holding back the urge to celebrate before it's time. Mom, Madeline said, taking a step forward. We just want to make sure everything is as it should be. Of course, I replied, ushering them in. I appreciate your concern. We sat down, the ticking of the grandfather clock filling the gaps between question and question. The doctor's first questions were gentle. Date, time, my birthday. Basic cognitive reviews. I answered without problems, my mind as clear as ever, but as the questions became more personal, I saw how his mask began to show cracks. And how have you been emotionally? He asked, pen in hand. The loss of your husband, the management of the property, do you find it overwhelming? I tilted my head, offering him a measured smile. Henry has been dead for almost 6 years. Doctor, of course I miss him, but grief doesn't negate ability. If it did, I doubt half the CEOs in this country would have jobs. He blinked, his pen stopped. Chase shifted in his chair, his shiny shoes tapping the floor impatiently. The doctor cleared his throat and continued. Have you ever forgotten things, lost objects, lost control of your finances? Behind his professional facade, I noticed the small gesture of discomfort. He was looking, waiting for me to give him the excuse he had been paid for. I leaned in slightly. Last week I lost my reading glasses. I confessed with a soft laugh. I had them on my head. But if that's a reason to declare me incompetent, they might as well disqualify half the population. Madeline's face tightened. Chase exhaled through his nose, frustration seeping under his neutral tone. The recorder, hidden under the side table, captured everything. Dr. Frederick closed the session quickly, said polite phrases and promised to review his notes. As he put away his portfolio, I accompanied him to the door, my voice low. Doctor, I said when we reached the threshold, I hope your notes reflect the truth. It would be a shame for your reputation to become entangled in something more murky. His eyes narrowed, doubt flashing across his face. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm a professional. Of course you are, I replied calmly. That's why I trust you will act accordingly. The door closed behind him with a dry click. Madeline and Chase said nothing when I returned to the living room. Their security trembled like a candle about to go out. Tea, I offered, pouring myself a cup without waiting for an answer. They didn't know it yet, but their plan, so meticulous, was already falling apart. They let a snake into my house, but I greeted it with a smile and a knife hidden behind my back. The game wasn't over, but the advantage they thought they had was slipping away with every second. The report arrived 3 days later. A cream envelope, one of those that wants to look important. Madeline almost tripped to bring it to me, with that face that struggled between satisfaction and expectation. Dr. Frederick sent his evaluation, she announced, leaving it on the foyer table, as if it were a trophy. I nodded, my fingers barely touching the sealed flap. Thank you, daughter. She stayed for a moment, searching my face for a sign, something she could read. She didn't find anything, so she turned and went down the hall. As soon as I heard the door close behind her, I opened the envelope. Inside was a brief assessment, measured to the millimeter. No accusations of incompetence, but no praise for my lucidity either. A neutral text, designed to leave them room to maneuver without compromising the doctor. He's more cautious than I thought, I murmured, stroking the edge of the paper with my thumb. But caution was no longer enough to protect them. Not now. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Silas. I imagined it, he said, after I read him the summary. Frederick's reputation isn't solid, but he's not stupid. He knows Chase is already in trouble. Perfect, I replied. Let's tighten the screws. During the following week, Mr. Silas's team worked in silence, digging further into Chase finances, his contacts, and above all, his desperation. It didn't take long for the cracks to appear. To failed real estate developments, several unpaid contractors, a quiet lawsuit for misuse of funds, and behind it all, the imminent collapse of the image they had worked so hard to build. By Friday, Mr. Silas had everything gathered in a file as orderly as it was damning. We met again at the same hotel, at the same hidden table where the world couldn't intrude. He slid the folder across the table to me. It's worse than I thought. I opened it, reviewing pages with suspicious transfers. Altered documents, promises whispered to creditors that Chase couldn't fulfill. They're already circling him like sharks, Mr. Silas continued. It's not if he's going to fall, it's when. And when he falls, I said softly, they're going to come looking for me. My house, my assets, my name is still tied to his rotten empire in ways they never imagined I would discover. I closed the folder, my mind clearer than ever. It's time. Mr. Silas nodded. Everything is ready for the transfer of the trust. Once it's filed, they lose any legal right. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the years finally releasing. They think I'm still playing checkers. I'm used to it. Mr. Silas's lips drew a rare, slight smile. You're playing chess, and they have no moves left. We agreed to the signing for the following week. No noise, no witnesses, no warnings. Meanwhile, I continued to play my role with an accuracy that didn't break. Tea with Madeline, smiles for Chase, the sweet confusion of an older mother who relies a little too much on their advice. They never saw it coming. The night before signing the trust, I stayed in the library. Henry's old diaries lay open on the desk. His firm handwriting filled the pages, reminding me of the man who always knew how to see past charm and ambition long before I could. You warned me, I whispered, my voice barely overcoming the crackling of the fire. But grief clouds judgment, and love makes even the smartest person foolish. Not anymore. I closed the diaries and saw my reflection in the glass door of the cabinet, for the first time in years. I didn't look away from the woman in front of me, firm, serene, as quietly as possible. By that time tomorrow, my estate would be protected by an unbreakable legal structure, and Chase and Madeline would finally understand who they had underestimated. The day of the trust transfer dawned like any other. Soft light filtered through the lace curtains of my study. The air had a faint scent of lavender from the candle I had lit early, but beneath all the usual, something electric thrummed under my skin. It wasn't nerves, it wasn't fear. It was the constant hum of control, something I hadn't truly felt in years. Claire arrived shortly after 10, as impeccable as ever in her slate gray suit, a tightly closed leather folder under her arm. Her presence filled the room with a tranquility that didn't need words. Ready? She asked, smoothing her sleeve before sitting next to me at the old oak desk. I nodded, my fingers resting lightly on the edge of the paper she placed in front of me, more than ready. The notary arrived shortly after, a young woman with a sharp look and precise movements. She wasted no time reviewing the documents, each sheet elaborated and verified down to the last detail. Irrevocable Frederick-Lee family trust. It had a definite weight, a firmness that calmed that silent pain that had dwelt in my chest for too long. As I signed the last sheet, I thought of Henry, of the nights we spent right at that desk, talking about retirement, investments, how to secure Madeline's future. How ironic that protecting her ended up becoming protecting myself from her. The notary placed her seal, clear and firm. It's official, she announced as she put the finished papers in her folder, effective immediately. Claire gave me a slight, approving nod. They can touch, they can threaten, they can scheme, but they can't touch what's already secured. Relief settled over me like a warm blanket, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was the first move. Now they're going to push harder, I said quietly, watching the steam rising from my untouched cup. Let them, Claire replied. Desperation makes anyone clumsy. And Chase and Madeline were already showing the cracks. Later that day, Madeline arrived unannounced. I found her standing in the foyer, pretending to be calm, her arms crossed over her designer blouse, her eyes moving around the entrance, like someone studying a terrain they think they know. Mom, she greeted with that smile that no longer held anything. I just came to see how you were. How thoughtful, I replied, guiding her to the terrace with that naturalness that takes years to rehearse. We sat facing each other, the silence stretching until discomfort began to mark her face beneath her impeccable facade. Finally, she spoke. I know things have been tense lately. I just want you to know that Chase and we just want what's best for you. I tilted my head slightly, with an expression as smooth as freshly ironed linen. Of course, dear, her smile tightened. And for the family, for the property, I know you've been thinking about the house, about the future. I took a sip of tea, enjoying the warmth. I have hope, she said, her eyes lighting up, naive and enthusiastic. Good, because with your signature, we could ... I already took care of that, I interrupted sweetly. The words hung between us like thick fog. Madeline blinked, her mask wavering. What ... The house, the property, everything is already settled, I said without haste, putting my cup on the saucer with a light clink. Everything secured. Panic crossed her face like a shadow. Mom, you didn't. Yes, I did. My voice remained soft, but now there was steel underneath. Don't worry, dear. It's protected, from predators, from bad decisions, and from desperation. She looked at me, searching for a crack, a sign of confusion. I gave her nothing, because for the first time in many years, I no longer had anything to lose and everything to recover. She stood up stiffly, her facade crumbling. "You made a mistake." "No, love," I whispered as she turned to leave. I finally stopped making them. When the front door closed behind her, I allowed myself a brief smile. The board was already set, and her king was cornered. The following days unfolded with a strange calm, like that heavy stillness that announces a storm. Outside, life went on as usual. The mail arrived, the garden bloomed with all its summer pride, the neighbors pruned their fences. But within these walls, you could feel it, the tension tightening more. The invisible gears of their desperation, grinding harder with each passing hour. They thought I didn't notice the black car parked 3 houses down for 2 hours yesterday, or that sudden rain of calls with no registered number that never left a message. But I did notice. Now I noticed everything. It was Claire who anticipated it first. "They're regrouping," she said calmly on the phone, leafing through legal files as if she wasn't building the defense of my life. "They've already seen that fourth isn't going to work. So now they're going to come with soft hands, careful smiles. Prepare for the tears." The tears came sooner than expected. 3 days after Madeline's last visit, Chase showed up, without legal threats, without feigned speeches. He brought flowers, pale pink roses, just like the ones I carried at my wedding. A cunning, sentimental play that lowered the guard. "Mrs. Sterling," he greeted from the porch, in a low voice. His expression measured to the exact point between humility and hope. "May I come in?" I watched him for a moment. His posture screamed salesman, but his eyes, those slippery, calculating eyes, betrayed him. He wasn't coming to reconcile. He was coming to recalculate. "Of course," I replied calmly, stepping aside. He followed me to the living room and left the flowers on the foyer table. A light layer of sweat pearled his temple. Desperation doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it comes dressed in neatness, in rehearsed manners. But now I could smell it. "What a beautiful house," he commented, his gaze wandering around the frames, the antique clock. Madeline always spoke fondly of growing up here. I said nothing. Let him talk, let him spin his web. "I know everything has been tense," he continued, sitting on the edge of the armchair. "But we've reflected a lot on how we handled things, on how we approached you." I sat in my usual chair, crossed one leg over the other, firm as stone. "Continue." A flash of discomfort crossed his face. He wasn't expecting so much composure. "We want to make amends," he said seriously. "No pressure, no papers shoved under your nose. We just want peace." I was about to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I tilted my head slightly, pretending to think about it. "That's the only thing I've ever wanted, Chase." "Good," he replied with a smile that sounded like relief. "Varnish on rotten wood, because Madeline is worried about your health, about everything, and I promised her I would come to see you. Man to man," he added with a forced laugh, wanting to seem humble. There it was, manipulation disguised as charm. "How thoughtful," I replied, getting up from the chair. "Come with me," he frowned, but followed me as I guided him down the hall, past Henry's study, until we reached the greenhouse in the back of the house. Sunlight streamed through the glass roof, casting long shadows on the tiled floor. I pointed to the old wooden desk against the wall. The documents of the irrevocable Frederickly Family Trust were there, carefully arranged, sealed, notarized, untouchable. Chase's face lost all color as he read the heading. His security crumbled. "You see, Chase," I began in a low voice, firm as polished stone. "I already made my peace. The property is protected. The house is no longer a bargaining chip. And you have no moves left." He swallowed, his eyes jumping between the papers, searching for an escape. "You played the long game," I continued, taking a step towards him. "But you underestimated your opponent." His mask shattered completely. The salesman's smile dissolved, revealing the bitter rage he had underneath. "You think this is over?" He spat through his teeth, his voice sharp. "No," I whispered, not looking away. "It's just beginning." And with that, I left him standing there, cornered by his own arrogance, the weight of his failure falling on him like a storm cloud about to burst. It was barely dawn when my cell phone vibrated on the nightstand the next morning. I wasn't surprised. After Chase's visit, I knew they were going to run. Desperate people don't sleep well. The caller ID said, Madeline. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice soft, with a just woke up tone. Mom, she said, her tone trembling, more cracks than words. Can we talk? Silence stretched between us. I could hear her ragged breathing on the other end of the line. I waited. Sometimes silence reveals more than any question. It's just ... She hesitated, and I could almost see her wiping her tears, rehearsing what came next. I didn't know Chase went yesterday. It wasn't my idea. I smiled slightly, looking at the ceiling, the morning light drawing soft patterns on the plaster. Of course not, Darnell. It was all about balance. Let her believe that I was still wavering between doubt and trust. Let her build the concrete of her downfall herself. Please, she whispered, desperation seeping through without filters. Can we see each other? No lawyers, no papers. Just ... just you and me. I let the silence hang for a second longer before answering. Okay. This afternoon. At the Rose Garden. The Rose Garden, the place where Henry used to walk with her as a child, cutting flowers for her hair, teaching her how to prune without hurting herself. If she still had anything sincere left, it would show there, and if not ... Well, I already had other plans. At noon, the garden glowed under a golden and tranquil light, the perfume of the roses floating in the warm summer air. I sat on the stone bench under the arch, with the willow leaning at my feet, lulled by the heat. Madeline arrived on time. She wore a simple cream blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, her makeup soft, almost childlike, calculated image. But I already knew her signs, the slight clench in her mouth, the glint of fear in her eyes. She sat down next to me carefully, her hands interlaced in her lap. This shouldn't be like this, she began, her voice breaking, just enough to sound sincere. No, I nodded calmly. It wasn't. She turned to me, her eyes shiny. I never wanted to fight with you. I never wanted lawyers or police. Her voice trembled. I just wanted to protect what Dad built. That's all. The nerve tightened my stomach like an icy knot, but I kept my face expressionless. Chase, he pressured me, she whispered, tears welling up. The debts, the Ridgeview project. I didn't know how bad it was. I thought if we secured the house. Her voice broke there, the well-rehearsed facade shattering. Or at least that's what she wanted me to believe. I watched her. The fine lines of her face, the edges of panic, clinging to every word. For a fleeting second, I saw her at 17 again, laughing in the garden, braiding wildflowers into her hair, still free from the rot of ambition. But that girl no longer existed, and the woman in front of me kept spinning her web. You were willing to declare me incompetent, Madeline, I said slowly, letting the words fall like ash between us. She shuddered, shame or maybe fear passing over her face. I wasn't thinking straight. I was scared. Her voice broke for real this time, or enough to seem that way. Please, Mom, I don't want to lose you. We can fix this. I took her hand gently. Her fingers trembled under mine. Yes, we can, I replied in a voice as smooth as silk, but not through deceptions, not with manipulations. She nodded quickly, her eyes wide, hopeful. I'll talk to Chase. I'll tell him to stop. No pressure, no lawyers. We're going to solve it. Just, please don't close the door on me. I smiled slightly, patting her hand. Of course, daughter. But inside I was already 2 steps ahead, because what Madeline didn't know, what Chase didn't suspect either, was that Claire and Mr. Silas had already secured everything. The trust, the audits, the recordings, the legal documents. Their safety net no longer existed. Only the fall remained. When Madeline got up to leave, drying her eyes with a handkerchief, she looked at me one last time. I love you, Mom, she whispered. I kept my gaze steady, impossible to read. I know. And as she walked away, her shoulders tense with contained fear, I exhaled slowly, feeling the last few months releasing, like threads floating in the air. The storm was almost here, but it wasn't me who needed shelter. The next morning, I woke up with that rare, unsettling calm that only comes when you know the worst is over, but the consequences still have to blossom. The house was silent. That kind of silence that feels more like a public holding its breath than peace. Downstairs, I prepared my tea the way Henry did, strong, dark, without sugar. I wasn't in the mood for tenderness. Willow wound around my ankles, purring, sensing the change in me. The newspaper remained untouched on the counter, but I already knew that the headlines wouldn't matter compared to what was coming. Near noon, Claire called. They filed the request, she said without preamble, without needing greetings. legal guardianship, full petition, declaration of incompetence with urgent character. They want control immediately. A bitter smile appeared on the corner of my lips. Just in time. Her voice remained firm, but underneath you could hear the satisfaction. I already contacted the judge. You'll get the formal notification in less than an hour. Let them believe they won. For now, the timing couldn't be more ironic. Just an hour after the call, a messenger knocked on the door. He was young, nervous, with a coat that was too big for him. "Mrs. Sterling?" he asked. I took the thick envelope from his hands. "Thank you, son. Take care of the heat," I told him. He blinked, confused by my calm, but left without asking anything. The content was just as expected. Official notification for a guardianship hearing. Their accusations written in clean, clinical language: cognitive impairment, deficient financial management, inability to make rational decisions, vulnerability to external influences. It read like a list of symptoms for declaring an elderly adult incompetent, and among the annexes, a declaration signed by Dr. Alden himself. I let the papers fall on the table, exhaling slowly. The nerve still hurt, despite having prepared for this. Madeline's signature was there too, elegant and serene, next to Chase, their united front, as polished on paper as in their smiles, but underneath, only desperation. What they didn't know, what they never imagined, was that Mr. Silas already had Alden's private records in his possession. The payments, the emails, the evident conflict of interest, and the recordings, their voices, their plans, their reckless arrogance, all archived, ready to come to light. They were building their case on sand, and the tide was already rising. That night, Claire arrived with a good bottle of whiskey and a spark of triumph in her eyes. "Tell me," I asked as we settled in the study, the fire crackling softly, "what are their chances of getting out of this?" Claire poured 2 glasses, each movement precise, elegant. In mathematical terms, almost nil. Emotionally, they're already falling apart. She slid me a new folder, thicker than the previous one, heavy with printed emails, account statements, transcripts. On the cover, a simple label: Anderson Estate, evidence of fraud and abuse. "They wanted to bury you," Claire continued, settling on the armchair across from me. "But they forgot that you built the foundations." I drank a sip, letting the smoky flavor fill my mouth. "Henry always said, never hand over the keys to your kingdom unless you're ready to never see them again." Claire smiled slightly. "A good man." We reviewed each sheet, each piece of evidence, preparing every detail for the hearing. It was no longer just about defending myself. It was time to expose them completely. The money trail, the manipulated doctor, the priest feeds their own words. By the time we finished, the clock struck midnight with a soft sound. The house settled around me, no longer as a cage, but as a fortress. "They have no idea," I whispered to myself as I climbed the stairs to the bedroom. "Still don't." And as I fell asleep, the date of the hearing hovered in my thoughts, not with fear, but with a calm, just anticipation. The reckoning was approaching, and I was ready. The courthouse smelled of lemon polish and contained anxiety. Years had passed since the last time I was there. The last occasion was when Henry and I signed the documents for the estate plan. Back then, the hallways felt cold, but safe, the beige walls guarding a firm calm. Today, they were a stage. Claire walked beside me, her heels marking a constant rhythm on the mosaic. Mr. Silas followed behind, his face impenetrable, but his eyes alert, scanning every corner like a predator measuring the terrain. Room 3B, the place where everything would be defined. "Ready?" Claire asked in a low voice as we stopped in front of the doors. I adjusted my scarf, the fresh silk against my neck. I've been ready for months. Inside, Madeline and Chase were already seated at the long, shiny table. Their lawyer, a cocky guy in an expensive blue suit, hovered next to them. Madeline's hairstyle was impeccable. Her expression was serene, but her eyes fixed on me with something colder than contempt. Fear, perhaps, though not enough yet. Chase, on the other hand, didn't even dare to look up. He kept his gaze fixed on the table, his jaw clenched, his fingers tapping the wood with anxiety. They weren't expecting to see me like this, so whole. The judge entered, a woman with a sharp look and a firm attitude, her robe impeccable, her presence forceful. The process began without delay. Formalities, presentations, the official filing of the guardianship request. Their lawyer spoke first, in a voice as smooth as velvet. "Mrs. Sterling's cognitive function has shown progressive deterioration. Her estate is complicated, her health fragile. My client only seeks to protect her interests." I kept my face neutral, every muscle under control. The judge nodded, leafing through the documents. "I see here the declaration of Dr. Alden, supporting the indications of cognitive impairment." A flicker of victory was drawn on Madeline's face. She believed they had already won. Then Claire stood up. "Your Honor," she began, with that perfect tone between professionalism and firmness. "Before this court assumes anything about my client's ability, we wish to present additional evidence." The judge gestured for her to continue. Claire handed over a file, the real one, the one that Mr. Silas had put together so carefully. Inside, the payment records, the emails between Chase and Dr. Alden, the recordings transcribed in detail. The judge's eyebrows furrowed as she read, "Bribery of a medical professional." She repeated aloud, turning page after page, "Attempts to manipulate a diagnosis for personal economic gain." The room stirred. Madeline tensed. Chase turned pale. Claire continued calmly, "Furthermore, Your Honor, my client has at all times retained legal clarity. She herself created an irrevocable trust for her estate, beyond the reach of these individuals. She has also documented in audio and in writing her complete understanding of the situation." The judge looked at me, her gaze sharp, but with interest. "Mrs. Sterling, do you wish to say something?" I stood up slowly, letting the moment settle in the room. "My daughter and her husband believe I am weak," I began in a low voice, letting my words fill the silence of the room. "They have mistaken grief and patience for incapacity. But I assure you, Your Honor, I have spent my entire life protecting what my husband and I built, and I don't intend to give it up now, not to them or to anyone." A heavy silence fell over the room. Madeline opened her mouth, surely to object, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm, barely shaking his head. The judge reviewed the documents once more, then exhaled. "I have seen enough." The ruling was immediate. The request for guardianship was denied, and a formal investigation was opened for financial manipulation and abuse against a senior citizen. As the session adjourned, I saw the exact moment when Madeline understood that her castle of lies was coming down, and I left that room free, not only from their plans, but from years of silent wear and tear. Outside, Claire put a hand on my shoulder. "It's over." "No," I corrected softly. "It's just beginning." Because now it was their turn to feel the powerlessness. The headlines came faster than I imagined. It began with a discreet note on a local portal: "Real estate developer under investigation for alleged exploitation of senior citizen." Just a few paragraphs, no photos, no names. But by the end of the week, it was everywhere. Chase's face appeared on every digital news site, the glossy photos from old social events now next to words like fraud, conspiracy, and financial abuse. Madeline's name didn't take long to come out, although the media tried to paint her as the concerned daughter caught in a family conflict. But the court documents told the truth, and so did the recordings. His empire, built with cocktails and charity galas, was coming down, thread by thread. I watched it from my living room, drinking tea, Willow curled up in my lap, like a little gray sentinel. The television murmured, broadcasting their fall. "Mr. Silas called that afternoon. I wanted you to know," he said with that quiet precision that characterizes him. "The state's financial crimes unit just froze all of Chase's business accounts." I exhaled, evenly. "Good. He's cornered. The lenders are already surrounding him." Silas continued, "The partners are withdrawing. Ridgeview is dead." A quiet satisfaction grew in my chest. It wasn't vanity. It was the calm of knowing that the foundation they built with manipulation and greed was finally coming down. And I didn't have to raise my voice to achieve it. That afternoon, as dusk filled the windows, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't a loud knock, but a hesitant one. Grace peeked her head into the living room. "It's her," she whispered. Her eyes narrowed. I got up, smoothing my sweater, and opened the door. Madeline was there, disheveled, pale, her eyes swollen, her mascara smudged at the corners. "Mom," she said in a broken voice. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside, inviting her in. We sat on the terrace, the same one where she once served tea with feigned sweetness, hiding her intentions between soft phrases. But tonight she didn't act. Tears ran down her cheeks. Her hands trembled as she held the cup. "I lost everything," she whispered. "The house, the business, Chase. He's under arrest. I finished softly. Yes, I know. Her shoulders slumped with all the weight on top. I never wanted it to come to this, she murmured with a broken voice, but even she knew those words sounded hollow. I watched her in silence for a good while. I could still see snippets of the girl she was, the one Henry adored, the one who clung to my skirts after falling and scraping her knees. But on top of that was the other, the cold and calculating woman, the one who saw me as an obstacle that had to be removed. You made your choices, I said in a low voice, each word measured. And now you're living the consequences. Her chin trembled, but I didn't move to comfort her. Not tonight. I never wanted to hurt you, she murmured. You didn't just hurt me, I replied. You tried to erase me. We were silent, with the grandfather clock ticking in the background. For the first time in months, I felt untouchable, not only before the law, but also inside. Madeline's tears no longer moved me. Her regret, even if it was sincere, wasn't going to undo what she did. I got up, leaving the tea untouched on the table. Go home, Madeline, I said in a low voice. If there's anything left that's worthwhile. She stood up, her shoulders defeated. She walked towards the door. I didn't see her leave. It wasn't necessary. When the door closed behind her with a slight click, I turned to the window, watching how the last light of day was lost on the horizon. The house was safe. I was safe. And for the first time in years, I was completely free. The days that followed fell into a strange, almost serene calm. The press was still on top of Chase's case, the investigation growing, rumors of other victims coming to light, bribes, hidden accounts. His image, once impeccable, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The well-polished mask broke beyond repair. Madeline's face disappeared from the public eye. There were no more charity dinners. She no longer appeared in magazines, posing on the staircase of the foyer, flaunting the family legacy. That staircase, those photos, this house, were never hers to flaunt, and now everyone knew it. I spent the mornings in the garden. The earth still kept the cold of spring, but that never stopped me. I pruned the roses, repotted the ferns next to the windows of the terrace, and restored the herb garden that Henry cared for with that quiet affection. It felt like returning to solid ground. The house was quiet, but in another way. Not empty, not tense, just at peace. That peace that comes after the disaster, when the remains are gone and the ground feels firm under your feet again. Grace stayed with me, of course. She moved through the house with the same silent efficiency as always. But now, when our eyes met, her eyes brought a new glow. Pride. You did it, she said one afternoon, as we cleaned the kitchen counter. They underestimated you. They always have, I replied without further comment. Mr. Silas kept me informed. Chase partners flipped quickly, looking to save themselves. They froze his accounts. They sold properties by order of the court. Madeline's assets, what little remained, were stuck in legal battles. I didn't gloat. There was no pleasure in watching them fall, just a quiet, inevitable justice. The real victory was simpler. The house was mine. The gardens, the terrace, the main staircase, the library full of Henry's diaries, the family photos carefully stored, no longer used as a set for other people's deceptions. Everything was where it should be. One night, when the sky was tinged with ash and lavender, I found myself standing in front of the study window, Willow curled up at my feet. The garden lamps lit up along the stone path, casting halos of light on the wet grass. The doorbell rang. Grace, quick as always, peeked her head into the living room. Do you want me to see? I nodded. It's okay. She came back a few seconds later. A letter, ma'am. It wasn't from the court, nor from any office, just a cream-colored envelope with no return address. I opened it carefully, the smooth paper under my fingers. Inside, a single sheet. Madeline's handwriting. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to believe I've changed. I don't even expect an answer, but I wanted you to know something. I'm sorry, not only for what we tried to do, but for having forgotten who you are, for thinking you were someone I could manipulate, for believing that your love made you weak. I was wrong. And now I have to live with that. Take care of the house, take care of the life you built. Madeline. I folded the letter and left it carefully on the side table. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger, just a quiet, firm acceptance. The house sighed when the wind moved the curtains. The ticking of the clock filled the silence. I had nothing left to prove. No more fights, no more masks to hold up. Just peace. I turned off the lights. The house fell into calm. Willow followed me, her paws barely sounding on the floor. Outside, the garden lights shone, the gates remained upright. The house was silent, and I, Victoria Sterling, was finally home. The seasons turned as always. Time, in the end, fulfills its promises, even when people break theirs. By summer, the scandal was a thing of the past. Chaseface disappeared from the headlines, replaced by new dramas. Madeline retreated to a private villa out of state, licking her wounds in her silent exile. From time to time some gossip ran through the neighborhood, a murmur in the market, a muted conversation in the cafe. But within these walls, at last, peace. The house breathed differently now. It was no longer burdened with broken promises, nor was it a stage for others to act out their ambitions. It was simply mine. I walked through the hallways under the morning sunlight, which spread over the wooden floors like golden ribbons. I opened the heavy doors of the library. The smell of old leather and worn paper welcomed me like an old friend. Henry's diaries were still there, orderly, respected, untouched by greed. Sometimes I reread them. His neat, meticulous handwriting still offered his silent wisdom. After so many years, I still heard him. In those pages he once warned me that unbridled ambition consumes people. He saw it coming. I didn't listen then, but I do now. Grace was still here, of course. She took care of the house with a quiet authority, her loyalty as constant as the dawn. Sometimes we had tea on the greenhouse terrace, watching the breeze move the tall shrubs. Curious, she commented one afternoon as she stirred honey into her cup. One always believes that those closest are a refuge, but sometimes, she shook her head, sometimes they are the storm. I nodded, sipping my tea, and sometimes you survive it. We smiled without saying more. Silence was enough. At dusk, I walked through the garden. The rose bushes bloomed with bright stubbornness. The stone path felt firm under my feet. I had my routines, the nighttime tea, the old radio playing soft classical music. The gray kitten curled up at my side, and the house, she remained as proud as ever, the tall windows gleaming, the staircase impeccable, the foundations firm, intact, immovable. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about recovering what was mine. Proving in silence that loving doesn't mean giving in, that aging isn't the same as becoming defenseless, that being silent isn't surrendering, it's strategy. The neighbors greeted with courtesy. The murmurs died down, and in their place, respect. Sometimes I passed in front of Henry's portrait in the foyer. His eyes sparkled behind the glass, his smile painted with a silent pride. I liked to think that he would be proud, not only because I protected what we built, but because I remembered who I am. Victoria Sterling, widow, matriarch, survivor. The last letter from Madeline arrived in autumn. No threats this time, no legal jargon or desperate pleas. Just a note: I'm not going back, Mom. I get it now, but I hope that someday, when the house is quiet, you walk through the garden and think of me, of how it was before all this. Before we forgot how to be a family. I hope that maybe you can forgive me. I did put the letter aside, folded carefully next to the others. I didn't feel rage or resentment, just that quiet acceptance as always. Forgiveness, perhaps with time, but trust, that's gone. That afternoon, I walked to the garden. The sky bled lavender and gold as the sun set behind the trees. The house remained firm behind my back. Willow walked at my side, her green eyes shining. In the twilight, the world out there continued its course. The neighborhood quieted down, and I, finally, was at peace, with no shadows at my back. The wind moved the tall hedges, the lanterns along the stone path flickered, and for the first time in a long, long time, I was at peace. The house sleeps peacefully now, its walls wrapped in shadows and the soft hum of the night. Out there, beyond the iron gates, the world turns. Some pursue fortunes, others cling to power, weave lies well disguised behind careful smiles. They rise, they fall, they forget. But here, not anymore. Here the silence spreads, firm, constant. The old boards creak with familiar warmth. The garden murmurs under the moon, stubborn and alive. The front door remains closed, not out of fear, but out of quiet strength. I sit by the window, the tea cooling at my side, watching how the night settles. There's no hurry anymore. There are no battles left to fight, no masks to hold, just the house, the garden, the loyal ticking of the old clock on the mantelpiece. Time takes us all forward, whether we realize it or not. Curious about storms. They roar, they tear, They shake the earth, but they pass. And when they do, if you have held firm, if you knew who you were under the noise, you are still standing. Older, perhaps. Wiser, no doubt. But standing. So tonight, if you hear this in your quiet room, perhaps with a fan whispering softly in the background, remember this: the world can shake your windows. It may try to take what is yours, but the calm, the strength that is underneath, that belongs to you. It has always been yours. Now let the lights go out, let the shadows lengthen, and sleep knowing that you are firm and safe.